Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por asistir una vez más a las conferencias virtuales de Pelagios, Cacunjá y Migramar. Vamos a esperar unos minutos a que suba más el número de participantes. Muchas gracias.
Saludos desde Jalapa, Veracruz. Desde Chile.
Chile. It's coming up slowly. 88 participants.
I can see 93.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Nicaragua.
Nicaragua, Ecuador, Argentina.
Argentina. The UK again. Colombia. Oh, lots of people.
Minnesota, USA.
Colorado.
Cabo
San Lucas. Romina. Ireland, Pete. Spain, USA, again, Yucatan, Brazil, Germany, Galapagos, Germany again. Nice. Costa Rica.
Natura. Brasil.
Rio de Janeiro.
Chile.
Chile again. Nice. Fundación Malpelo from Colombia.
Sandrita. Puerto Rico. Shark Project, Austria.
Desde La Paz. Muy bien, ya se están sumando más personas. Vamos a esperar unos minutos más antes de iniciar. Un par de minutos.
We have 123 participants, Peter, so far.
Desde el Mogote. MT. Hola, MT. She's a famous free diver that lives in La Paz, Pete.
Oh, really?
She's great. Yeah. She's a free diver master free diver. Tuxpan, Veracruz.
Yeah, I remember Fred
Boyd.
Yeah, he told me he could hold his breath for 9 minutes. That's hard to believe, but he was amazing free driver.
Incredible. He's been the only person, well, him and William Winram, the only two persons able to tag hammerheads at Revigigedos. As you know, they're deep, so scattered.
Really deep, yeah.
Really deep. And
did he do it at a cleaning station? Is that what he did? You know.
Yeah, exactly. At a cleaning station. And also in Roca Partida, just out in blue water. That was Fred at 42 meters depth.
So I told Fred that, you know, he rather than ambushing them at a cleaning station, you look at one or two of them and you follow them, and then it becomes 3 or 4, then it becomes a dozen, then it becomes 50. You remember, James, at Wolf Island.
Then you hit the
and you kind of follow them away from the shore. Then you get to the school. That's and then true. You don't have to dive very deeply.
That's true. However, in Roca Partida, they're typically deep. And
yeah, they are deep there.
To do that, you have to be quite deep.
Yeah.
More than 120 feet, kind of thing. So, 11:03. We'll wait a couple more minutes and we'll start.
We want to get everybody aboard.
157 participants, attendees. Carmen Pasos desde California. Hola, Carmen. Ciudad de México.
Salvador
de nuevo. Muy bien. Muchas gracias
Oye, James,
por
se oye
participar.
eco. ¿No tienes dos computadoras?
No,
Se oye mi voz.
no, no. ¿De veras? ¿Sigue igual?
A ver, hola, hola.
Hola,
Ya,
hola, hola, hola.
saludos desde Panamá, España, Cipolite, La Paz, Ciudad de México,
Ok.
Honduras, Ecuador, Asturias, España.
Muy bien. Pues, no, creo que ya estamos. Ya está. Ok, 170. Pues te marca ahí.
Uy, otra vez te escuchaste medio mal, James.
Sí, sí. ¿Cómo se escucha el audio? Al.
Como eco.
Yeah, from the people
Como
that
si
are
tuviera
calling
la
us, we get an
garganta.
echo.
Ok. A ver, ¿cómo está ahí el audio?
Igual, mal.
Con eco.
Ahí ya se escuchó bien.
¿Ahí
Is
está
my
mejor?
voice going to be
Okay.
good? Do I have an echo,
I
or
think
you can ask some of your people?
Pete.
your audio is
You're
fine.
perfect.
Your audio is fine, Pete. I think it's my computer. Okay, so we're going to start. Mauricio, pues dale, adelante.
Ok, pues bienvenidos a todos, buenos días a estos webinars de los tiburones, las áreas marinas protegidas llevados a cabo por Migramar y Pelagios Cacunjá. Ya hemos tenido varias presentaciones. 10 de abril, por mi parte, el tiburón blanco en México. 15 de abril, la doctora Sandra Besudo, los tiburones en Isla Malpelo. 17 de abril, el doctor James Ketchum, los tiburones del Pacífico Mexicano y las áreas marinas protegidas. El 22 de abril, el doctor Alex Hearn, los tiburones de la Reserva Marina de Galápagos. 24 de abril, el doctor Yanis Papastomatiu, con el uso de la telemetría para el diseño de áreas marinas protegidas. Y ahora estamos muy felices porque tenemos aquí al doctor Peter Klimley. Les vamos a pedir que por favor las preguntas las hagan en la zona de Q and Answers y ya lo que nos quieran decir, los saludos, etcétera, por el chat, para que al final nosotros podamos hacerle las preguntas al doctor Klimley. Listo, James.
Muchas gracias, Mauricio. ¿Cómo se escucha mi audio?
Bien.
Bien, ok.
Sí.
Bienvenidos una vez más. Como dijo Mauricio, estamos ya en la última conferencia de esta serie de webinars. Muchas gracias por venir y tenemos el placer y el gusto de tener al doctor Peter Klimley. Voy a dar una breve introducción de su biografía, primero en español y luego en inglés. Welcome everybody for our last webinar series of Pelagios and Miramar. We have the pleasure to have here Dr. Peter Klimley. I'm going to have first his bio in Spanish and then in English. El doctor Peter Klimley es considerado uno de los pioneros en el estudio del comportamiento de tiburones en su ambiente y es reconocido como uno de los principales expertos en el gran tiburón blanco y tiburón martillo. Estuvo trabajando por muchos años en el Departamento de Vida Silvestre, Peces y Biología de la Conservación de la Universidad de California en Davis. Ha publicado cerca de 180 artículos y tiene 3 libros sobre el comportamiento y la ecología de los tiburones. Peter Klimley ha participado en múltiples documentales sobre tiburones y ahora está escribiendo un libro que esto está un poco anterior, pero ya lo terminó, un libro básicamente sobre sus aventuras y sus investigaciones. I'm going to say now his bio in English. Dr. Klimley is considered one of the pioneers in the study of behavior of sharks in their environment and is recognized as one of the leading experts in great white sharks and scallop hammerheads in the world. He used to work in the Department of Wildlife, Fish and Conservation Biology at the University of California, Davis. He has published around 180 articles and 3 books about the behavior and ecology of sharks. Peter has participated in multiple documentaries about sharks, and he just finished a book that I forgot the title. Pete, what's the title of your last
Dr.
book?
Hammerhead Swims with Sharks.
That's it. So it's a series of stories about his research with sharks all around the world. Thank you, Peter Klimley, for joining. Go ahead with your presentation. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you a lot, James. It's a real privilege to be here with 2 of my most outstanding students who are now very successful scientists. So it's a pleasure to give a talk. And you notice that both of them are authors of this talk that I'm giving, because I'm using data that James collected, as well as data that Mauricio collected. So there are a number of people that are listed here as authors. And I'm going to talk about designing marine reserves for sharks in the Eastern Pacific. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my theories about magnetic, let's see if I can move this guy. Let's see. I can't advance it. Let's see. How do I advance it?
Like if you were giving a talk, like with the arrows from your keyboard.
With the arrows in your keyboard.
Yeah, but it's not. They're not working now. They're not
working. So then, with the mouse, click on the presentation with the mouse.
Okay, and go to next.
Yeah.
So in 1981, this is a long time ago. It's ancient history. You know, I went to this seamount, the El Bajo Espiritu Santo, in El Golfo de California, and at this time, no one was diving with sharks, and we went to this island, and it was kind of murky, and we dove down, and suddenly we were amid sharks, large number of sharks. And we went out to a seamount off the offshore, and we wanted to know how many sharks are there. So how do you determine how many sharks are in a place? Well, you dive down and you attach a color-coded spaghetti tag, and that's shown in the bottom there. That one was blue, yellow, blue. And there you see it, the school of sharks, lots of sharks. And they slowly pass by you. So how do you count them? Well, you can use what's called a Lincoln index. And that is the number of sharks present is, you tag them, okay? And there's a relationship. The number of sharks present to the number of sharks observed is equal to the number of tags deployed and the number of tags observed. So if you look down to the next line, you see the number of sharks present. Underneath that, the number of sharks observed. To the right of it equals, to the right of it, 21 tags that we put on in the morning and 9 that we observed in the afternoon when we went diving. It gives you a number of 525 sharks, a lot of sharks. Now, in 2000, we returned to the seamount, and to my utter dismay, but while free diving, we saw only 6 of them. They were as if they were outlaws running from the law. You know, they seem to be. And so the fishing of sharks impacts populations, partly because they grow slowly. They have to get well mature a number of years before they give birth. For instance, with a white shark, it can be 42 years. And then and then they don't have a lot of young. A hammerhead shark maybe have 20 of them. A white shark just 1 to 9. So below here you have a time on the abscissa and number of millions of pounds of sharks on the ordinate, and you can see that green line. It asymptotes and then it comes down where even though the number of boats going out are more and more and more, they're just not catching anymore. Now, the Brits, they love fish and chips. And so they caught all the sharks in their waters, dogfish in their waters, and then they started catching our fishermen were catching them and selling them to them. And sure enough, you have the same result. And this is historically has happened in Florida. It happened around World War II when they were catching them for oil, but it then here later, it's happened off Ireland with basking sharks, and it's happening in the Gulf of California, and could happen elsewhere in the Eastern Pacific. So it's really difficult to sustain a fisheries for sharks over time. Again, as I said, they grow slowly, they have few young, and it takes a long time to get reproductively active. And so an alternative to this is to cater to ecotourists, enabling them to view sharks in a, now I would just say I've known a lot of fishermen, but I've never known a wealthy one. They're always struggling, whereas people in ecotourism do quite well. So here I am looking down at those sharks weeping. They have been caught, and now let's see. Now, pelagic sharks are attracted to seamounts, and these are volcanoes that rise above the seawall with deposits of basalts from eruptions over geologic time, and they often occur in chains, such as the Galapagos Island archipelago or the Hawaiian Islands. Here, this is where this seamount is. It's off of La Paz. It shows this is less, the first call out is the bathymetry of it, low resolution. It's high resolution, the two peaks there. And essentially, the water moving over a seamount, it is compressed and it moves faster. It's just as if you are hiking over a mountain. You get to the top and they call it windy passes. This is the same. And so more particles, zooplankton, are moving along the top of the seamount, and it's here where species aggregate. Now this is a graph showing the assemblages at the El Bajo Espiritu Santo. The black line in the bottom shows temperature, and you can see during the summer, I'm going to move this over a little bit. During the summer, temperatures are high. Then during the winter, they're low and they're high. The blue are, the red are the summer assemblage, which consists of the green jack, the scalloped hammerhead shark, which I love and studied much of my life, but the yellow snapper and the dolphinfish. Winter assemblage, the red line are the yellowtail amberjack and red snapper. So now I want to talk a little bit about the creation of seamounts, because I have a theory of what's called geomagnetic topotaxis. Most ecologists think that animals are present in a place because food's present, and that's true. But how do they get to one place? And in the ocean, which is, we can see, but with the visibility, maybe 10 meters at best, how do animals get from one location to another location in this environment that is, it's opaque? And what happens is we have the crust that spreads, and basalts come to the surface at these oceanic spreading ridges. And as they move away, the Earth's field will rotate periodically, and you have a pinstripe pattern of strong and weak magnetization. But also, as shown on this figure to the right, as or to the left, as that the lithosphere subducts, you create these islands and an island arc. And now right below that is the bathymetry of the seamount El Bajo Espiritu Santo that I've spent many years studying. Below that is a dipole that it creates, because the basalt will come up and erupt at one time. The Earth's field is in one polarity, but then there's an eruption many years later, hundreds of thousands, in the opposite direction. So you have this imbalance of little magnetic particles that come up with the basalt, and it creates a dipole at a seamount or an island. But then the magma that comes out of during that eruption, that goes away, and it can go as far as 20 kilometers. I've been at the Galapagos Islands and looked in a decent distance, and there you can see one of these lava flows that's gone. And so what I found at this seamount, now there you have the seamount shown in low resolution, but then high resolution. We put coded tags, acoustic tags, on hammerhead sharks. And we put receivers that detected those. One, monitor one, which is shown right on the northern peak, and then monitor two on the southern peak. Now, think of that circle there as a clock, with the top being midnight, the bottom being noon, and each concentric circle are detections of individuals. And if you look at it, you can see those detections, they line up, because these are schooling individuals that they come into range of it, and then they go out of it, and then they come back into range of it, go out of it. And then at the end of the day, they leave by themselves to go out and forage in the environment. Now, I took this receiver right here at the bottom that was on the southern, that got no, this is amazing. It's only 200 meters from each, these two monitors, and there are no detections on the one on the south. So I took that, and I thought it was malfunctioning, but I took it and I moved it over to where monitor two is, and sure enough, there were sharks there. And I have always wanted, because this is a dipole, to wind a coil around the whole thing and change the polarity and see if the sharks, instead of being at site one, would go to site two. And I mentioned this to fisheries biologists. They say, no, we don't want you to know how to catch fish that easily, because there would not be many sharks anymore. Now, we tagged a shark at the seamount, and this shows its trajectory going away. And there was a little swimming sensor on it, and each one of these arrows in these circles right here, there are 10 directions. Look how directional the sharks are swimming. They're swimming as directional as you drive a car from New York to Florida on a highway. And they do that as far as, this is 20 kilometers, as 18, and then when we were tracking this shark, it's the middle of a dark night, and we have a mother vessel right in the center here detecting our boat, and then suddenly it turns around and comes back, and I said, it's going to go right under the vessel. So these tracks coincide with these magnetic lava flows. And when we talk about marine reserves, to some extent, you almost don't have to track animals around them to know where they go. You know that their movements are constrained by the road that they take away to the market and back to where they live in the suburbs. This is a complicated slide, but I've just shown you these are, it's one is along a magnetic reversal lineation. See, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and 2 is coming back, and you can see that if you look at these arrows, that when it's coming back, it's in number 2, the magnetic valley number 2. Yet when it's going out, and you see 1 right there, it's going out in the magnetic, at the edge of the magnetic lineation. So, and people said, now how can they do that? Well, they swim random. So I had to do a simulation. If the simulation on the bottom shows that this is not random at all. And I wanted to study the hammerhead shark because the head of the hammerhead shark is so unique. It's so different than anything in the world, maybe a hammerhead bat or something like that. I felt that it could teach me something really unique. And I think that's, it is that it's a gradiometer, and it can allow them to find locations and move from island to island. And that's what I'm going to talk about right now. These islands in the Eastern Pacific. The Galapagos Islands, which consist of the tropical ones, Darwin and Wolf Island, Cocos Island off of Costa Rica, Mapello Island off of Colombia, and the sharks move between these islands, we believe, and James and Mauricio share this theory with me, going between stepping stones, in a sense. Just think of the animals in the Kalahari desert when it gets really hot, and the herbivores, they start moving, they go to a water hole. Well, the lions follow them, then they go to another water. These are stepping stones. The seamounts, to some extent, are similar. So these are islands I'm going to talk primarily about Wolf and Darwin, 2 great places. If you want to go to a place to see sharks, those 2 places. But then also the Revigigedos Islands right here in the northern part is a great place. It consists of Roca Partida, Socorro, Benedicto, and just slipped my
Clarion.
Yeah.
Clarion.
Yes. That's good. I needed you guys to help me there. So here are the islands, Darwin and Wolf. You can see, if you look at Wolf, look at the northern end of it, where it's a second, that's a volcanic cone. And Darwin, there's a volcanic cone right in that area. So here you have the Galapagos Island. They're created, it's the plate is moving over a hot spot, and it's creating these islands, and the newest ones are at the bottom. The oldest ones are at the northernmost, Wolf and Darwin, and they're slowly eroding with the sea, and at some point they'll disappear. That'll be terrible because we won't be able to see sharks there. And we see lots of sharks. We see the hammerhead shark at the top. We see the Galapagos shark to the left there, the silky shark, a more pelagic shark, and the whale shark. At Darwin, if you see where that arrow is, that is the bus stop. And it's called the bus stop because whale sharks line up and come by there and march by there. So here we have James Ketchum, the great James Ketchum, diving down and tagging a hammerhead shark, placing one of these coded tags there. It's shown in the upper, and these tags are kind of silent for a while, and they go, and then they're silent for a while. And this detector down here, this receiver shown right here, I'm circling it, will detect the shark when it's there. Now there, James is diving down to tag a whale shark. Now whale sharks are hard to tag because they've got a really thick skin, and they're moving their tails very slowly, but they're moving very fast. So to tag one, you really have to go down and swim as fast as you can and to tag them. So, and James was able to do that, to his credit. So what we have here, and I talk in graphs. I mean, I love visuals because that is the real thing. Words are always imprecise. And so if you look at this on the bottom, you have a month. Each one of this is a different month. And on the ordinate there, you have daytime. And you see in the center is daytime, on the top and the bottom are nighttime. So you can see here that at Roca Partida, this rock that comes out of nowhere, and sharks are swimming around kind of like King Kong swatting airplanes. I think of it as a place like that. You see that during the day, they're on the east side, the green, you see all the green. During the day, noon in the center there. At night, they're on the west side. So they're at that island day and night. This is the silver tip shown there. It's interesting. You have a white tip on the top, silver tip on below that. It's there day and night. The tiger shark. And the tiger shark's a predator which eats these different sharks. It's at Socorro Island day and night, but then it moves over to San Benedicto. It's there day and night. Blacktip shark is shown on the bottom. If you move all the way to the right side of the graph, you see blue and orange. It's there during day and night. But you see there are points: Darwin, Wolf, Cabo Martians, Cousins, Gordon, Dormido. The blacktip shark is almost like a ecotourist diver. It goes to all the best diving spots in the Galapagos Island. It was tagged on the 24th of June, 2006. It moved to Santa Cruz. It then Cousins Rock, then to San Cristobal, Leon Dormida, over to Gordon Rocks again on Santa Cruz, then to Cabo Marshall, and then back to Wolf. Last detection, the 3rd of September, 2011. So this is a shark that spends day and night at a location, one particular site, one hotspot, but then it'll move to the next one. But it stays within the archipelago. There are other sharks that are Diel offshore migrators, like my beloved scalloped hammerhead shark. Now, in the beginning here, it is at Wolf, both during the day and night. But then, as you go over time, you'll see it's at Wolf only during the day. The Galapagos shark, below that, if you look at 12, you'll see that in the red part later, when it's at Wolf, the 10th of July 12th through October, it's now there during the day, but not at night. But now the silky shark is different. It's there at nighttime and not during the day. And then one really cool shark, the small-toothed tiger shark, sand tiger shark, that at Malpelo Island, we would only detect once we got down to 30 meters. And it's present only at nighttime. So you have, but these are the sharks that are by and large staying at an island or an archipelago. The whale sharks, they're planktivorous. They orient to fronts, but they do pass through Darwin Island. They go all the way out into the Eastern Pacific, but then they come back to this precise place, and then they go off Peru and come back. So to study a whale shark when it's moving away from you can't use one of these coded tags in a receiver. You got to place a satellite tag on them. And here we are. I don't know whose hands those are. Maybe it's Alex Hearn's hands, or maybe it's even Mauricio's hands. And you put this is actually James, and James was with us because this was when we did Hammerhead Highways. we got this shark and we put it in into the cradle, and then we lifted it out of the water, put water through the gills, and placed tags on them. And we did the same for tiger sharks at Cocos Island. And here's some graphs that James put together showing where they are. Now, these satellite positions are not perfectly accurate. So you can see that in the bottom one, the tiger shark is swimming over land. No, they don't swim over land. So this is a question you probably ask me. It's just the inaccuracy of the positions. But then when you're talking about let's say a whale shark moving across the ocean, accuracy plus or minus a kilometer is not a problem at all. Galapagos sharks generally stay at the island. Here you see all those points, the PTTs, the different satellite transmitters indicate that they're clustered there, but they do occasionally make movements. They migrate at times. Hammerhead sharks often do this refuging, like they go away and then they come back. So this is maybe 30 kilometers and they come back. This is part of the rationale that James used to create the reserve at the Revigigedos Islands, this knowledge of how far away they'd go. But then sometimes they make long distance movements, like the 600-kilometer movement. Silky sharks, even a little more mobile than the Galapagos shark and the hammerhead shark. They make larger movements, but they stay. You can see the number of positions that are at Darwin Island. Whale sharks, now that's a great Alex Hearn there, all set up. And he has a little, what he ended up using was a little device with a propeller that would propel him really fast so he could actually tag these whale sharks. He tagged, I don't know, 32 of them. You can see they're making these moves way out into the eastern Pacific, but then they come back right to that one place. Again, these hot spots, and they have a magnetic signature. These are important aggregation points. And then he goes off, or she goes off along Peru and comes back. So I think of this as similar to the poster you see of different Chiles. The hotter, the higher, and you have a thermometer on the left that explodes at the top when you have a really hot Chile. But now we're talking about the degree of mobility to these sharks. So the white-tip reef shark, silver-tip, blacktip shark, tiger sharks are local most of the time, though they may make an occasional migration. The Galapagos shark, the sand tiger shark right here, the hammerhead, they're making these movements offshore, and I'm arguing that they use these magnetic ridges and valleys that lead away to guide themselves so they can go out to a foraging place, feed squid. No, the small two-sided have these gnarly teeth that scare people, but really they're used to grab soft-bodied squid. And so what is the rationale for creating marine reserves? Well, there's a keen interest among the public in viewing them. And at the Galapagos Islands, they have a hammerhead celebration where they have this huge hammerhead made out of cloth that people hold over their head, and they walk into Puerto Vallarta carrying this hammerhead shark because it's a big deal. People from all over the world go to Wolf and Darwin to see these, just as they used to at Espiritu Santo. And there's a big financial benefit for the local economy from it. It's a big deal. So I think we can protect sharks. I actually think sharks are not the thing to eat. They are a K species. They don't grow quickly. They have few young, and now that we fish for them, and it's unsuccessful because there's so few of them, you catch them. What you want to eat is you want to eat tuna, yellowfin tuna, which grows to 1 meter in a second. Or you want to eat a salmon that matures and it comes back after 1 year or 2 years. Or, of all things, quiere comer Revilligigedos, that is calamar, the squid. They grow to adulthood in 1 year and can be 1 meter, and they're delicious, muy delicioso. So this is information that is being used to enlarge the boundaries of the reserve at the Galapagos Islands. And again, you have on the bottom, you have time. On the side, you have these different sharks. And if you look at this rectangle right here, you see that that shark moves from Darwin Island to Wolf Island. That's 1227. 1226 moves from Wolf Island also to Darwin Island. The whale shark's only there, passes through on its migration. But now let's look at the hammerhead sharks. Now, James, Alex, and I tagged a number of hammerheads. And I think they may have been stressed because they all left and they went over from Wolf Island to Darwin Island. But if you look to the right of that rectangle, red rectangle, you could see, let's say 1223. It's at Wolf Island, Darwin Island, Wolf Island, Darwin Island, Wolf Island. Or the one 1220, Wolf Island, Darwin Island, Wolf Island. So there are sharks moving between these two islands, Wolf and Darwin Island. Now, the way they were managed in the past was by having a protective area just around the island, and one around Darwin Island, one around Wolf Island. Now, what we're recommending and is a large boundary, and part based on James's information on that hammerhead shark, but also my information on magnetic patterns that they use to make these movements away, back and forth and back and forth. So there should be a reserve that encompasses both and a swimway between it. And this is what we're thinking more about these islands in the Eastern Pacific, that not only do we have to protect species at those islands, but along those swimways. We have found that some sharks move between islands, but we've not studied enough to really know whether they're just going out in a diffusion and getting there, or whether they're going in a road, like you might drive on a road, but not drive on the soil on either side of the road. So this information is been communicated to the park, to the Pew Foundation. Alex Hearn has been involved in that. Now I want to talk about two heroes of mine, James Ketchum and Mauricio Hoyos, who've provided scientific rationale for the creation of a reserve at the Revigigedos Islands. And Mauricio is shown there with, I think, a lot of abogados, lawyers. So here are the islands of the Revigigedos. This is San Benedicto. You can see right there, you can see the volcanic craters. Now you see Socorro Island down there. Now you see Clarion, which I couldn't think of before. And now you see this incredible place. This is like the Empire State Building rising out of the middle of nowhere with sharks swimming around it, 6 or 7 different species of sharks. It's an incredible place. And people from all over the world go there. The boats are there. People are unloaded, they dive, and only after they come out of the water, then people from the next boat go there and a small boat and enter the water and see them. This is an incredible place, this Roca Partida. This whole area is a incredible place. And James and Mauricio have supplied the following data to people through in the Mexican government, to research managers. If you look here at the Galapagos sharks, you can see that there's blue, and blue is San Benedicto, then it goes to Socorro, then it goes to San Benedicto, Socorro, San Benedictus. So Galapagos sharks move between the islands. Silver-tick sharks really do lots of movement between the islands. There you have Socorro Island, Roca Partida, then to San Benedicto, then to back to Roca Partida. Here you have Roca Partida, Socorro, back to Roca Partida, and finally you have Roca Partida to Socorro, and then the shark doesn't go somewhere else. Who knows exactly? Tiger shark, okay, it feeds on these smaller sharks. Well, what do you think? They are staying there. This tiger shark, it was tagged at Socorro. It moved to San Benedicto, stayed there for a long period of time, and then came back. So what this has done is that led the government of Mexico to create a reserve. And I'm going to just show you oh, wait a second. We're going to get it. Previous. See that rectangle there? That is the park. Created on the dimensions based on input that James and Mauricio provided. And why I'm talking about this is I think that people that are listening to this webcast, you're from all over the world. Think about the success here. You can do the same thing. And you, if you're a scientist, you provide these managers with really good science, and they can protect something if necessary. So now I want to show you the next slide after this one. So you can see the islands there. Now the question is for all of you, where is the reserve? Now the white points are all boats. And you can see before they were fishing. Look at all the boats off of these two islands, particularly off of San Benedicto. Look at that rectangle, no boats, one boat. Oh, that son of a gun, we'll get him. We'll send a boat out after him. But it worked. And for that reason, I as the master's father, or the PhD father of these two students, I am so proud of them for doing this. And thank you for listening. And algunas preguntas.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Pete. Thank you very much for your very thorough presentation of all these projects and data and everything that we've gathered through all these years. Thank you very much. So there's a set of questions that Mauricio and I will be telling you right now. Estamos entrando ahorita a la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Como dijo Mauricio al principio, por favor, en la sección de preguntas y respuestas o Q&A en inglés. En el chat pueden hacer comentarios, pero las preguntas, por favor, para no estar buscándolas por todos lados. Okay, Pete, so...
James, you can translate my answer if you want to, you know.
I will translate, yeah.
Okay.
Vamos a preguntar en inglés para que Peter Klimley pueda contestar. Here's a comment from Gustavo Daneman, and he says, "Hi, Peter. I had the honor to join your team in one of your trips to El Bajo Espiritu Santo, together with Felipe Galvan back in the 80s. It was an unforgettable experience." So back then he was probably a student. Maybe, I don't know if you remember him.
And that,
he's from Argentina.
Oh, really? Yes.
Originally. Yeah. Okay,
I had a lot of students on it, and these were great trips, you know, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Great memories. So here's a presentation. It says, question. Thanks for your presentation. Much of the efforts for marine reserves have been related to spatial areas such as seamounts or coral reefs, but with migratory species, sometimes key reproductive stages fall out of such places. Hammerhead pops, as you mentioned, move through Central American corridors, which usually overlap with artisanal fishers. Any thoughts on temporal and spatial alternatives for marine reserves that can tackle migratory routes?
So, and this is a very good question, by the way. It's a very good question, and it's a question on our mind. James, we have a group called Migramar, and it contains scientists from all over Latin America and some from North America. And we are interested in knowing whether the females, let's say adult female hammerhead sharks, are moving to shore and to give birth, and whether there are these corridors. We don't know for certain. We want to we know, in my opinion, there are ridges that lead, and they're created, they're magnetic, they're volcanic, they're created by the Darwin Spreading Center, and they've created a ridge going to Costa Rica, a ridge going to Panama, a ridge going to Colombia. And so there's this magnetic highway there that could be used to guide them. And James, Randall Araz, Alex Hearn, and Mauricio were interested in putting listening devices on these seamounts along a string of these and showing the movement. Now, off of Cocos, there are two seamounts called Las Gemelas, the two twins, and they have found that two species of shark have moved from Cocos to those two. Now that's the first stepping stones on the way maybe to the Galapagos Islands, so they can move to the Galapagos Islands too. And so this is a very, very important area of research that we need to look at. It's going to provide James, Mauricio, Randall, and younger researchers something to really find out. Boy, I can't hear you, James.
I was on mute. So I don't think there's time to translate, but most people attending are understanding English.
Okay.
Otherwise, they will ask.
Sure.
There's a second question here. It says, finally, with the coronavirus areas beyond jurisdiction, may see a surge on overfishing to compensate with fisher losses. Any further thoughts on monitoring and control for those areas that are not really, there's no surveillance? I think that's what they mean.
So as I showed in that figure, which was supplied to me from Frida Lara, and I think it may have come from, it came from either James or Mauricio. So the commercial boats have to have a beacon on them, and they are detected by the satellites. So they have to be careful where they go, at least in the Revigigedos Islands, they have to be careful. Some of these other islands, like, for instance, Mapello Island, you know, it's very isolated, and there's a boat that goes there, but doesn't go there very often. And I know that Sandra Basuto at one point were there, and she was beset with making a dive and seeing all these dead hammerheads on the bottom that had been finned and just left to die. I mean, I wouldn't want to be, she's probably crying in her scuba gear over that. And so it is difficult but more feasible now. And we are all on a paper that was published in Science magazine, which where all our tracking data was plotted, and where the boats are was also plotted. And of course, the boats are where the sharks are. But anyway, it's getting to the point now where you can monitor commercial fishing boats and implement some kind of protection for Cocos Island or Mapello Island or Wolf and Car. But then there are artisanal boats, the small boats. I don't know what you can do, but a lot of those small boats can't get to Mapello Island. And for a small boat to get to Wolf, it's a long haul. It's a long haul. So that's a very, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Go.
Go.
I was just going to say, there's another one about coastal corridors. They're still asking about what are your thoughts on actual protection or modeling marine protected areas and coastal corridors, if any possibility about that in terms of the coastal areas.
So James published a paper on 7 gill sharks that were tagged in San Francisco Bay, and we had a colleague in San Diego, Andy Nussel, who had some receivers out, and found that the 7 gill sharks that he tagged moved down there. So there is a movement likely along the coast. It's really difficult. Do you close the whole oceans to fishing? I like the idea of making reserves at hotspots, because then you can control fishing. You can't stop fishing everywhere. That's infeasible. It's really hard to do. Chase down boats and everywhere in the ocean. But you can, now that we've found that there are these hotspots and that they are aggregated at them, like the Seamount or even Guadalupe Island, where Mauricio has spent a lot of his time, his career there. You can protect, like at Guadalupe, nobody's going to go in there and kill a white shark. You got a lot of boats are going to be a lot of people are going to be really pissed off at that person. They do that. Even the case of a shark getting caught in a cage, it caused a calamity, So I like the idea. So what is the approach they've taken in California? Lou Botsford has been very critical. Is they've resolved hotspots, and they've closed those hotspots. Now, the thing about a hotspot is eventually some of the species diffuse out of it, and they get caught. That's okay. But still you have that core there to sustain your population. That's a challenge, is to make that core big enough to sustain your population.
Here's a good one, Pete. What is your opinion about sustainable shark fisheries, like the spiny dogfish in the U.S. East Coast, or gummy shark in Australia?
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's some species like the brown smoothhound that we have on the West Coast, but maybe the also the bonnethead on the East Coast, they become mature in a year or two and give birth to a large number of young, and so those species, are more along the lines of being our species, growing quickly and giving birth relatively not after a long period of time. And then, but then if you look at the Greenland shark, it doesn't get mature until I think 100 years, and it lives to 350 years. Just imagine killing one of those things. I mean, I feel terrible about it, because they live. It's like cutting down a redwood that's 1,000 years old. It's a terrible thing. So I think, the challenge is what you eat. I think we're pretty good at it, in the sense that we eat chicken. Anybody's kept chicken, I've grown what are called meat chickens. They just stay in one place. They don't move at all, and they grow, and they go to the bathroom, and they grow really quickly. And so people all over the world eat chickens. Beef, like 3 years. They can grow for a little, 1 to 3 years. They're slaughtered year 4. They're also a good source of food. And then, as I said, that there are certain fish that grow quickly, the tunas. Of course, yellowfin tuna, it's worldwide prized and eaten. And I think the populations are sustainable because they grow. I think one of the things that bothers me is that we don't eat more squid in the United States, because what has happened to Revilligigedos, the large squid, it's moved out of the Gulf of California and moved up away from West Coast off of California, and it's here to harvest. And no hard. I go into a fish store and I buy squid. It costs me like $5 a pound. How can they charge me $5 a pound for a squid? They're just so again, I think this is a really important issue. What we eat, and we have to eat. We can't get around that. You know, there's a very famous cartoon where like the person's Dr. Hammerhead's eating. You can't eat meat, so I started eating. Well, plants are living. Don't eat them. So you can't eat the plants. What do you eat? Do you eat the snot from a roach or something like that? So we are humans. We do have to eat.
Of course. Here's another one. What was your motivation to study sharks in the Galapagos Islands?
Well, when I was working at Espiritu Santo, so I learned so much about sharks at Espiritu Santo, and I wanted to, and I was a pioneer. These receivers that are used, out of the first 3 papers that were published, 2 of them were mine, and I was involved in actually the development of them. There are probably 1,500 papers published already with that. Okay, so I knew stuff that nobody else in Latin America knew, and but I had a student, James, who was from Mexico. He came with me, and I had another student, Mauricio, came with me, and I showed Mauricio how to use a wrap system and how to tag, and he took off, and he's become a famous scientist in Mexico. James, so James was looking for a PhD project, so we went to the Cocos Islands because Sandra Basuto invited me. She wanted to know about this stuff. How does it work? And so I gave lectures. I brought the stuff, showed her how to work, and James with me, and we met Alex Hearn, who was at the Galapagos. And so Alex invited us. So James and I went there, and James did his PhD working in the Galapagos Island. And I came there a number of times. I loved it, partly because I found the fauna so simple. There's like 2 species of birds. One was a finch, one was a mockingbird. And they differed from island to island. And I thought to myself, I could have had Darwin's idea myself, because they're different in each other, but they eat different things, you know. And so the one that's feeding from flowers has a long bill, but the one that's feeding on cactus has a fat one. So I could have, you know, and so the Galapagos Islands are a great place, and I was so gifted to be able to go there and support what James was doing. He was the one who actually did a lot of the work that was done there with Alex. And Alex is now he's on the faculty at the University of San Francisco, and he is at they have a lab there, and
San Cristobal.
San Cristobal. Yeah, thank you, James. And he's teaching classes there and continuing to do research. It's wonderful to be a teacher and see your students conquer the world. I used to, at the end of every laboratory meeting, I'd say to everybody, go out and conquer the world. And they are doing it. Mauricio's doing it, James is doing it, and Alex is doing it.
Here's a good one. It says the lack of alternatives like ecotourism, which is a pro-shark argument, is difficult to counter or to limit the amount of fishing in an area that is proposed for protection. How to counter this to politicians? I don't know if it's
again, there are some species that are very mobile in the ocean. In fact, the yellowfin are so that although they come to hotspots, but they don't spend that much time at the hotspots. But the idea of reserves and okay, I was editor of Animal Biotelemetry. There's a paper on abalone and in a reserve in Mexico, and the point is that the abalone move, by the way. They're not all just staying in the same place. They move. We put a transmitter on one, and the thing almost gallops and run. But anyway, they go outside the reserve, so you can fish outside the reserve. So the idea of the reserve is to create a nucleus, a sump from which species disperse, and then you can feed on. I am not a person to say you can't eat anything, because then we wouldn't have anybody alive. But I think you want to feed on, and so I was going out to release a white shark, and they were catching the sea cucumbers. This guy had his boat full of sea cucumbers. I said to him, God, how long does it take for them to grow? I mean, that seems odd. Somebody told me 40 years. Can you imagine what that person does by just collecting those? So you need, I like the idea of marine reserves. The fact that ecotourism can be there gives another reason other than just creating a place where you protect a spawning population, a reproductive population, so it can then disperse out. But now you have people going and seeing them, so that makes it even better, I think. I hope I answered that.
It's a good one. Thanks. Here's a good one from Chile. It says we have boundaries with Peru in the north, and they have a very long coast, and there's a lot of sharks being fished with very low regulation. Sharks are sold as other fish, etc. Do you happen to know if there's any kind of research being done over here? Fisheries in Chile are massive, so it's overfishing, and so is the amount of sharks being fished.
So that's something that I've thought about quite a bit, and there is a young lady that has done some research on, I think it's on what shark? It's a thresher shark. So I went to Miramar. We had a meeting at a city. What is the name of that port that we had our meeting with, James?
Manta.
Yeah, Manta. So we went to Manta, and we went out and we saw got up at 5 in the morning, went out to see the fishery. We saw these boats come in one after another, taking out like 5, 6, 7 thresher sharks, other species of sharks too, but primarily thresher. I couldn't believe it. And I knew that there was a fisheries also at Las Arenas, which is another town more towards Peru. And I thought to myself, how can they be catching so many big adult thresher sharks? And then I thought to myself, well, maybe they are from Chile, because Chile has a coastline, from what I understand, it's like 5,000 miles or something like that. And yes, well, Peru has always had the biggest fishery they did at least for sharks, Peru. But Chile, I don't know if there are that many towns on the water that deplete the population, because I think there's this long coastline, and that's all I could use to explain what I saw in Ecuador. You would not find a fishery in the United States that would catch sharks like that, that many big sharks. And what we do in the United States is we know who's fishing, and there's usually an observer on the boat. We record how much it's caught, and if the catch starts decreasing, there's what's called a there's a stock assessment made by a bunch of mathematicians, you know, and if the number is decreasing, they reduce the amount of fishing. Now that's been very effective in Canada with the poor beagle shark. Very effective. I think it's effective on the East Coast, because I saw Randall Aronsis, you know, he doesn't want anybody to eat anything. He doesn't even want there to be shrimp farms along the coast. No, they can't do anything. But he had on his screen, he had a webpage saying that the population off the East Coast is now stabilized because of the management they're doing. So I think good management can work, but I think it's really hard with sharks. Again, they just grow so. Can you imagine a fisheries for Greenland sharks? God almighty, they'd get rid of them really quickly. By the way, they're amazing. You know, they flense a seal. They have copepods associated with their eyes, and when a seal comes down they like a slurp on, go, and then they're incredible.
So Pete, thanks. There's time for 2 more questions. So I'm going to go ahead and give you another good one. So it says here, besides extending the boundaries in Darwin and Wolf, what other measures do you think are necessary to make sure these hotspots and its biodiversity have enough protection?
Well, that's a challenge, you know, protection, you know, and it costs money having a boat go out. And I think from what Mauricio and James showed me, that graph showing where the commercial boats are, I think that makes it viable, you know. But the problem with Darwin and Wolf is that they leave Santa Cruz and they take a small boat there, and those aren't tracked. And so I know that Alex was telling me they had a boat. Well, Costa Rica, I think, had a boat that would go out and be on site. But that's the problem. That's a really good question. Que lástima, what do you do? You know, maybe you can control it actually at the fish market, but it's difficult to have somebody on site at all time, because that's a really isolated, those 2 islands. Very good question. Difficult one.
Yeah, there are many more questions. I don't think we'll have time. Hay muchas preguntas, no vamos a tener tiempo más que para una última. No sé si ves, Mauricio, una buena por ahí. A good question there, Mauricio.
Okay, we have one here. How can you define the specific area that you want to protect when you are starting to create a new marine protected area?
So what you really need to do is you need to track the movements of the animal, and that's what James has done, and Mauricio, you've done some shipboard tracking of white sharks, and you've looked at you've had those receivers down, and you looked at their movements, and you looked at movements between islands, and this kind of information is so important. Spatial ecology or movement ecology. And now it's different, you know, if you're looking at, we set up a 2D tracking system to track the movements of all things of, I don't know, red abalone. I think it's a endangered abalone, because they wanted to know how far the males moved so they could create a reserve for them. So that worked there, you know. In a larger area, you need maybe satellite tracking. And that's, this is an expertise that Mauricio and James have at Pelagios Cacuña, which has really been useful in Mexico. And, you know, they've given James gave a seminar on all these technologies at Distrito Federal, I think. But I think we want to make sure that all these technologies are known throughout Latin America, because Latin America is a huge place. It's a great place. I love it. Cono Sur, I love them. But they don't have all the technology. Oh, they're getting it more. I will say that they're getting it more. And in fact, there was a whole conference in Brazil recently, which was very important because I'm sure talks were given, tracking talks. So, whereas I started it, I brought it to, I started it in Mexico, but then I brought it to Mapello and then Galapagos. It's for Mauricio and James and others to disperse it, and really, I'm optimistic about the world's oceans. I like Randall said, you know, we're not seeing a lot of silky sharks at Cocos Islands now. Those goddamn fishermen caught them all. When I said, I was just at the Revigigedos Islands, they were everywhere at the surface. Maybe they've moved a little north because, you know, the warming of the ocean. So there's fisheries, and it's the famous story of fishing in Monterey that caused the collapse of the sardine fishery is not really accurate because the people have taken VARs and looked at the scales and in a section of the seafloor and found that there are over a period of time there are sardines, and then when the water gets colder there are anchovies in the sardines. So again, these are complex questions. Very good questions, by the way. I hope I've been entertaining.
I just saw a very good question as a final question from one of our students. It says, I'm curious about how did you know about El Bajo Espiritu Santo before you arrived to Gulf California? What drove you to come down here?
Well, so I had a professor that he knew Earl Harold, who was the curator of the San Francisco Aquarium. He had gone diving at El Bajo Espiritu Santo, and he had seen the schools of sharks. And so he wrote a single page, typed out report, and he died of a heart attack, actually, at the island, by the way. But he had written this, and my professor, he showed me that. He said, look at that. I wanted to study sharks, their behavior, anywhere I could. And I started trying to study blue sharks, but I didn't like that because we baited them, you know, and that was just, what do they do at a dinner table? And then I also was interested in I tried leopard sharks, but we couldn't get quite close to them enough. So this was possibly a system to study. I spent a whole year looking for them, and based on it. Now, what Don said to me, said, you know, if you really want to study sharks, you got to study these hammerhead sharks. They form schools. You can get right in with them. And he said, but the only problem is they're the third most dangerous shark in the ocean. They could eat you. Well, so we go out to this Sarava, which is not far from where James and Mauricio are, and we jump in the water with somebody, and sure enough, we see this school of sharks. This is after a year of looking, and so you know we then get our scuba gear on, and we come back the next day with so what we wanted scuba gear. They weren't there, so we didn't know what. So we came back the next day, and I dive down to scuba gear to about 100 feet, 30 meters. We're playing sounds, boom, 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 trying to attract them, and they didn't show up. So I come up, and I'm sitting next to Don Nelson, and Ted Rulison has to go to the bathroom. So when you go to the bathroom, you hold your knees and you look down. And he said, they're down there. And we realized at that moment, it was the bubbles that frightened him. So we got in the water just with our snorkel. Here's this remote place where only people would ever go there would scuba dive. Now we're snorkeling. And there they are down there. You can see these vague shapes of sharks, you know. I think I barely took a breath of air and I went down there and I could touch them as I went down. I could just right next to them. And then I'm looking up at the beautiful silhouettes. And I came to the surface, you know, and wow. And so from there we went out to this seamount because Ted knew about it, and I had that little piece of typed paper that told us about it. And so then I was with the sharks. And I would go out there, have somebody rowing my boat, and I'm in the water with a video camera, and I have sharks right at the surface. I mean, I could touch them, and they're doing all these things. I'm saying to myself, wow, man, they are communicating with each other. They're doing like this reverse flip with a full twist and darting to the left and right. And then there's the males are coming charging in with rotating a clasper, and Mauricio's showing that they pick out a female and they mate. And they're doing all these things that are really complex. So, and I was funded through the Navy because the Navy was afraid of sharks at that time because in World War II, the Indianapolis had, and so I kind of have the dubious achievement of stopping funding for many people that were getting money from the Navy. So then I needed to get money for something else. And that movement away and back seemed to me something really unique. And so I was able to get NSF funding. And then I studied white sharks because nobody knew about white sharks. And then I did go to Mount Pello, went to Galapagos, and James, Alex, and I was able to, we got a grant from that to do Sharkmen. And James, Mauricio, and I, we did Sharkmen. It gave us some money, paid for James. James had this terrible accident. He fell and smashed his patella. That was terrible. And so he was actually an invalid for almost 9 months, but he analyzed a lot of the data. And so the data that I showed you with its tiger sharks was James. So that reality show that Mauricio was a star in it and I was, and provided funding for letting, it's very difficult to get funding to study sharks. That's the problem. And Mauricio shakes his head, he knows, and James is like, okay, well,
well, many thanks, Pete. Thank you very much for your time. I think we took quite a bit of your time, and thanks a lot for doing the presentation, answering all these questions. There's still many more questions. I don't think there's more time, and thank you for answering some of those. And so we're going to wrap up right now.
And it's great to share time with two people I care for a lot.
Thank you very much, Pete.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mauricio, with the wrap up.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. This is the end of the webinars. I have seen that a lot of people is asking us to do more. So maybe we will talk about it because I saw a lot of comments about people telling us that they were super happy with all these webinars. Thank you so much, Pete. I remember when I saw you the first time, I was in high school and I saw you on TV and I thought, one day I would like to be with that guy in a boat tagging sharks, and I did it. And I owe you a lot. I really, you taught me a lot of things, everything that I know. So I really love you very much, Pete.
Okay, yeah, that's very, and I feel the same way about James. You know? We've been soldiers in arms. You know how it is? Soldiers in arms. Good to talk with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Pete. Muchas gracias a todos por escuchar. Gracias, este es el último seminario y esperamos en el futuro tener más. Muchas gracias a todos. Vamos a postear todos los webinars en el canal de YouTube de Pelagios. Van a estar todos los webinars que hemos presentado, todas las conferencias, algunas en inglés, otras en español. Y también vamos a poner en la página web de Pelagios y vamos a compartir en la página web de Migramar también todas las referencias que han estado preguntando, los artículos científicos que hemos estado usando, que se han usado para todas estas investigaciones, que han estado varios de los participantes preguntando sobre eso. Una vez más, muchas gracias a todos y que tengan muy buen día. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Pete. Take care.
Gracias, Pete.